There's a special kind of silence that fills a kitchen when you realize your husband doesn't know your name anymore. Not literally, but close enough. Mine was engraved in his mistake. The light from the chandelier was too bright, too revealing, bouncing off the glassware I had polished that morning, as though I was preparing for a magazine shoot. The table was set perfectly, candles placed in precise symmetry, plates aligned as if balance could make a marriage stable. I'd even made his favorite, lemon chicken with roasted rosemary potatoes, because this was supposed to be our 12th anniversary. I thought we'd eat, laugh, maybe remember who we used to be before law firms and bakery bills ate our conversations. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. Adam walked in 10 minutes late. He always said traffic, but I think traffic was his code word for I stopped caring about time when it stopped revolving around you. He carried a glossy bag from a jewelry store downtown, the same one that used to make me giddy when I saw their turquoise boxes. He smiled the way men smile when they believe they've done something right for once. For my favorite woman, he said, sliding into his seat. I smiled back, the trained hostess, as if my heart wasn't already suspicious from the faint perfume that wasn't mine. It smelled expensive, something floral and bold, like someone who enjoys being noticed. I poured the wine, pretending I didn't notice the way his phone face down on the table lit up every few minutes. Open it, he said, pushing the bag toward me. His eyes had that eager sparkle of a man certain of applause. I reached inside, felt the velvet box, and clicked it open. The necklace was beautiful. A thin gold chain, simple, elegant, with a small heart pendant. My hands trembled slightly, but I masked it with a smile. It wasn't until I turned it over that my pulse stuttered. Engraved in tiny cursive letters was one word. Isabel. I blinked, smiled wider. My voice came out smoother than it should have. Oh, it's lovely. Adam leaned forward, pleased. Yeah? You like it? It's perfect, I said, running my finger over the name as though admiring the craftsmanship. He didn't even notice. He started talking about his week, about some client who didn't understand a clause in a merger contract, about how exhausting the office had been. I nodded, every few seconds saying, like a metronome of marital routine. I wondered what Isabel looked like. Was she the client, the perfume? The reason he'd been smiling at his phone these past months. Funny story, he added between bites. The jeweler almost messed up the engraving. I had to double-check the receipt. I wanted to laugh right then, truly, deeply laugh, but my throat was tight. Oh? That would have been awkward. He chuckled. Can you imagine if they'd put the wrong name on it? I met his eyes and smiled. Yes, Adam. Imagine that. Dinner went on like a play we'd rehearsed too many times. Every movement was mechanical. The cutting of chicken, the lifting of wine, the brief meeting of eyes pretending affection. The whole time, that necklace sat on the table between us like a golden confession. After dessert, chocolate mousse that suddenly tasted like metal, I excused myself to the kitchen. The moment I turned away from him, my face crumbled. I pressed both palms against the counter, trying to breathe. I didn't cry right away. I stared at the tiled backsplash until my reflection blurred. When the first tear slipped out, I wiped it quickly. No sound, no theatrics, just quiet disappointment. From the dining room, Adam called, "Everything okay, honey?" "Just cleaning up a little," I answered, voice steady again. Years of bakery work had taught me control. Emotion doesn't help when there's dough to knead or fires to put out. I stared at the sink, the soap bubbles floating like little lies. I thought of the years I'd spent believing him, the countless nights I stayed up waiting while he worked late, the forgotten birthdays, the half-hearted apologies, the distant smiles that never reached his eyes. Maybe I had known for a while, and the necklace was just confirmation carved in gold. When I returned to the table, he was scrolling through his phone. I smiled, told him I was tired, and he kissed my cheek absently, already half somewhere else. I wondered if he'd ever kissed her that way. Careless, routine, the kind of kiss you give when you're done pretending. That night, I lay beside him, wide awake, counting his breaths. The house was quiet, except for the hum of the refrigerator. I thought of how ridiculous it was that I'd cleaned everything for this evening, polished the good cutlery, ironed the tablecloth. For what? For a necklace that belonged to another woman. Around 3 a.m, I slipped out of bed, careful not to wake him. In the kitchen, the moonlight pooled across the counter. The necklace sat there where I'd left it, gleaming mockingly. I picked it up, turned it over again, whispering the name like a curse I didn't believe in. Isabel, I said softly. The sound of it made me want to laugh again. A client, a woman, maybe a fantasy he thought he deserved. I sat down with my notebook, the one where I usually wrote down recipes, and instead wrote a list. Not of ingredients, but of actions. Step 1, find out who she is. Step 2, make him regret every confident smirk. Step 3, leave. It looked almost silly in my handwriting, like a to-do list for vengeance. But it steadied me. In the morning, I acted normal. I made pancakes, packed his lunch, even hummed while I brewed his coffee. He kissed the top of my head, told me I was a saint, and left. When the door shut, I laughed quietly into my cup. Saints don't keep lists like mine. That day, I visited my bakery supplier and told them I'd be pausing orders for a while. Taking a short break. I said it with a smile that probably fooled no one. I didn't care. By afternoon, I packed a small suitcase, a few clothes, my laptop, my grandmother's recipe book, and the engraved necklace. I left my wedding ring on the counter, next to a note that read, simply, taking some time off. Don't call. I didn't sign it. He'd know. The drive away from Maplewood Heights felt unreal, like I was steering through a dream I'd been waiting to have. The sky was clear, and the radio played something upbeat, almost mocking the weight in my chest. I thought of how neighbors would talk if they noticed my car missing. Lydia Crane from across the street would probably host a coffee morning, just to speculate. She always said, "You two are such a perfect couple." Perfect. If perfection meant smiling through lies, then yes, we were flawless. By the time I reached the small downtown district, the sun had dipped low. I found a furnished apartment above an old bookstore. The place smelled of paper and dust, but it was clean, quiet, and anonymous. I signed the lease for 3 months, paid cash, and told the landlord I was a food stylist working on a cookbook. The lie came easy. That night, sitting on the small balcony overlooking the street, I poured myself a glass of cheap white wine. The city lights reflected faintly on the necklace I'd placed on the railing. I didn't want to throw it away. Not yet. It was proof, beautiful, glittering proof that I hadn't imagined his distance. I opened my laptop. My fingers hovered over the search bar. Isabel Jewelry Boston, I typed first, nothing helpful. Then Isabel Marketing Firm, Isabel Larkin, Adam Whitman. There she was. Third result. Isabel Larkin, marketing director at a tech startup called Meridian Works. Her profile photo showed a woman with perfectly waved hair, a confident smirk, and a necklace strikingly similar to mine. My stomach twisted, but not from heartbreak, from fascination. I clicked through photos. Her posts were full of dinners, cocktails, captions about long nights at work with heart emojis. In one picture, I spotted a reflection in the restaurant window, a blurred silhouette that looked too familiar. Adam's shoulders, his watch. I zoomed in, but I didn't need confirmation. I already knew. I stared at her smile for a long time. She looked so sure of herself, so unaware that her glamorous posts were about to become her least favorite memories. I created a new account under the name Belle Cooks. My profile picture was a stock photo of cupcakes. I followed her, liked a few posts about travel and desserts, then sent a message. "Hi, I love your work. I'm starting a small bakery, and I admire your marketing posts. Would love to connect. It was simple, believable. The kind of message women like her received all the time. Within an hour, she replied, "Hi, Belle. So sweet of you. Happy to connect. Love supporting small businesses." I smiled. She had no idea. The next few days were quiet but purposeful. I studied her feed like a detective, learning her habits. Morning yoga, weekend brunches, work dinners, expensive handbags that probably cost more than my rent. I noted every place she checked into, every tagged photo that matched Adam's supposed business trips. Each discovery made me calmer, not angrier. Anger was too simple. What I felt was sharper, a kind of clarity that makes decisions easy. 3 days later, Adam called. I didn't answer. He left a voicemail, cheerful at first, then uncertain. "Hey, just wondering where you went. You didn't say anything. I'm worried. Call me back." Worried. That word made me laugh out loud. The sound echoed off the empty walls of the apartment. He texted after, "We should talk." I made a mistake with the necklace. Wrong order, wrong engraving. You know how these things happen. I could almost hear his voice, smooth, dismissive. Mistake. That was his favorite excuse. I typed a reply but didn't send it. "You're right. It was a mistake. Yours." Instead, I turned off my phone and went to bed early. I slept better than I had in months. The next morning, I baked. It wasn't for customers, just for me. I made cinnamon rolls, kneading the dough until my arms ached. The smell filled the apartment, warm and nostalgic. Baking was my way of thinking, measuring out sanity, folding it gently back into place. As the rolls baked, I thought of how this would all look from the outside. The loyal wife, the ambitious lawyer, the shiny suburb. People would say, they seemed so happy. People always say that when they don't pay attention. By noon, I had mapped out a plan on paper. Track her schedule, infiltrate their social media, collect enough truth to make his world crumble. Nothing illegal, nothing dramatic, just precision. When I looked up, the clock said 2 in the afternoon. I realized I hadn't eaten anything but pastry crumbs. I sat by the window with coffee, watching the street below, the regular rhythm of people living their lives. I imagined Isabel walking into one of those expensive cafes, her heels tapping confidently, her phone lighting up with messages from Adam. She probably thought she'd won some invisible competition. She'd learned soon enough that the prize wasn't what she imagined. As evening settled, I received another message from her account. "Belle, your desserts look amazing. We should meet sometime. I love pastry chefs." I almost dropped my cup. The irony of it. The woman whose name was engraved on my necklace, inviting me to coffee. I typed back, fingers steady. "I'd love that. Maybe next week. I'll bring samples." "Samples," I muttered aloud, smiling. "Oh, Isabel, you'll get a taste, all right." That night, I placed the necklace back in its box and tucked it into my suitcase. It felt like storing a secret weapon, harmless until it wasn't. Outside, the city hummed softly. I sat on the balcony again, sipping wine, feeling a calm I hadn't felt in years. The kind that comes when you finally stop trying to fix what someone else broke. Tomorrow, I'd start preparing the rest. I didn't know exactly how yet, but I knew the rhythm had shifted. Adam would keep calling, Isabel would keep posting, and I would be here, in the quiet, learning their patterns until I decided how to end them. Somewhere below, a car horn blared. I glanced at the street. Ordinary life going on, people unaware that someone was quietly rewriting the script. When I finally went inside, I wrote one last note in my recipe journal, right under the list of actions. Revenge, like pastry, needs patience. Too hot, and it collapses. Wait for the right moment, and it rises perfectly. I closed the notebook and turned off the light. By the time Adam woke up in our spotless suburban house, Wondering why the kitchen was too quiet, I was already gone. And nowhere had Wi-Fi, and a plan was forming. The apartment above the bookstore had a radiator that clanked like it had opinions. It made the evenings feel older, like a place that had watched 100 different people come and go and kept their secrets in the seams of the wallpaper. I liked that. It was honest in a way our house never had been. No glossy porches, no staged flower pots, just the honest flaking of paint and the honest smell of paper. I drank my coffee each morning at the tiny kitchen table and planned moves like a chess player who used to frost wedding cakes for a living. Cake decoration teaches you geometry, and geometry teaches you patience. Bell cooks became my quiet hobby and my quiet weapon. My fake account was a little thing. No personal photos, a logo I whipped up of a whisk and a cupcake, a handful of early posts about lamination and flaky butter layers. I tailored the voice to be warm and slightly awkward, the way new bakers talk when they're trying to convince strangers they know what they're doing. Isabel followed back within the day. That alone told me how much she liked applause. Her profile painted a picture of someone who lived under bright lights and liked being admired. Plenty of lipstick, plenty of travel photos, a skyline shot where the caption read, "Long week, but worth it." The caption hid nothing. People told the world what they were proud of and what they feared in the same breath. She wasn't careful with her check-ins. She tagged places, posted photos from dinners, and occasionally blurred the faces in selfies when she had other company. I learned to read the gaps, manufactured smiles, the short pauses between posts, the sudden flurry of activity that meant she'd been told something she shouldn't say out loud. Those little silences told me more than the curated images ever would. We messaged like women do when they want to be liked. I sent compliments, asked for marketing tips, for an imaginary bakery I said I was about to open. She answered with the practiced charm of someone who'd had practice turning casual acquaintances into followers. She used emojis like grenades, explosions of hearts, clapping hands, winking faces. She told me about a charity event she'd staffed 2 weeks prior, about a client breakfast she'd spoken at, about an awards gala where she'd stood next to executives and pretended to be interested in the speeches. Every detail was a breadcrumb trail. I collected breadcrumbs. A few days into our exchange, she posted a blurry Sunday morning photo, a steaming plate of waffles, a pair of sunglasses, a bracelet laying near a phone. The bracelet caught sunlight at the wrist, thin gold, familiar. I recognized the curve of the clasp like a pastry chef recognizes a certain brand of butter. My throat tightened, but I didn't make a sound. I didn't need to. My hands had learned to move with a purpose. I screenshot the post, zoomed in on the clasp until my eyes watered, and then I set the phone down to knead dough until the tightness in my chest loosened into action. Isabel's fiancé, Tom, came up in a comment thread. He liked the photo, left a laughing emoji, and texted something about meeting later to go over plans. Tom's profile was a beige, respectable sort of thing. Good job in finance, bad haircut in some of the photos, a steady smile that suggested he had been given the benefit of loyalty for reasons he trusted but didn't interrogate. He and Isabel had been engaged for almost a year, according to multiple tagged photos and well-worn engagement captions. People like him trust continuity because continuity feels safe. I planned to test that trust in ways that would be, if not gentle, at least precise. Meanwhile, Adam called and texted with a sort of injured calm that he thought would work on me because it had worked before. "Where are you? Are you okay?" he asked. He added a line about one more lunch this week and a future we could still patch up. The usual. He mistook my absence for something that could be fixed with remorse and a few public displays of affection. Men think apologies are performances. Women know the set list. I played the part to get what I needed. I texted back, neutral and a little wistful, the way people text when they want to appear fragile but not needy. I'm staying with a friend. Stress break, I wrote. I didn't say, you gave me a reason. I didn't need to. He called twice, left a voice message that sounded rehearsed at the end. Let's talk tonight, okay? For us. And then went quiet. He did not change his calendar. He did not cancel meetings. He assumed I would return to the script. On the third day, I agreed to meet Isabel in a cafe I knew was neutral territory. Plenty of patrons, tables close enough to eavesdrop accidentally. I brought samples under the pretense of pop-up tasting and wore a cardigan I'd thrifted and a smile that looked like someone who trusted the world. I'd been baking at odd hours in the small kitchen above the bookstore, turning out flaky croissants and sticky buns, practicing a version of myself that was calmer and meaner at the same time. The dough obeys physics and timing. Humans are messier. I wanted to be precise. She arrived in a tan coat and a designer tote. Up close, she smelled like the perfume that had briefly haunted our home, floral with an expensive arrogance. Her hair was windblown in a way that read as effortless, and when she smiled at me, it was broad and convinced. She had the kind of smile that made people tell their own secrets to her, as if trusting her face would make them interesting. She hugged me like a woman who liked being liked. "Oh my gosh, these look incredible," she said, peering at the tray. "You did these yourself?" "Yep," I answered. "Small operation, trying to get a feel for the product before I officially open." I said open like we might be talking about a storefront, and not something that would also rearrange other people's lives. We talked domestic marketing, Instagram routines, the curse of selfie angles. She told me about a client retreat she'd been at in Maine 2 weeks earlier, booked by a firm that did a deep dive on branding. The retreat had included wine nights and brainstorming sessions that ended late in the mornings, she said, with a flirtatious laugh. She didn't mention Adam. She didn't have to. Small-town conversations are often theatrical, stories told in broad strokes for the crowd. She was sincere in the way people are when their social identity depends on sincerity. She approved of my choice of glaze and nodded encouragingly when I spoke about butter ratios. The mundane folded over the monstrous like pastry over jam, smooth hiding roughness until you accidentally bite through. After she left, I sat with a latte and reviewed my notes. She'd said the retreat was 2 weeks ago. Adam had a client who'd required his presence in Maine the same week. Timing is rarely accidental. People who keep secrets are sloppy in predictable ways. They assume other people are too busy to care. That night, I returned to the downtown apartment and opened my laptop. I drafted an anonymous email to Bradley, Mason and Cohen's ethics committee. My fingers hovered above the keys longer than usual. The law firm's website listed compliance contacts and general counsel names, methods designed to sweep uncomfortable things into sanitized boxes. My message was clinical. Screenshots attached, dates, times, copy of messages where Adam had been less than professional with a client's director. I wrote it with the calm of someone sending in a tax form. No melodrama, no threats, just facts and images, clear and tidy. I hit send and felt the slight, guilty thrill of someone who has done something wrong for the right reason. It was an orchard of small violations. One email would not topple a man. But the firm was built on reputation. Reputations are brittle. A rumor in the wrong inbox becomes a stain. I also sent a copy of one particular screenshot, a text thread showing flirtatious messages, to Tom, Isabel's fiancé, via his business email I'd found cleverly, through a tagged photo of him at a conference. I wrote nothing when I sent it. No message, no accusation, just the image. He opened it at some point in the day and replied, terse and stunned. I watched his account when he clicked, watched him log out in a way that suggested he had read and not yet processed what he'd seen. It was surgical, exactly as planned. People respond to facts harder than to insinuations. There was a delicious cruelty to anonymity that matched the precision of baking. You mix ingredients and watch them transform. You do not shout at the batter to rise. You give it time and the proper conditions. I was feeding a different kind of heat. Word moved faster than I'd expected. Bradley, Mason and Co. has called Adam into a meeting he did not volunteer for. I watched his calendar update through an old habit. I'd logged into a shared document once on the pretense of checking an invoice and left a window open. It was sloppy, but not careless. Men with schedules are easy to read because they think their schedules protect them. They do, until someone rearranges the appointments. The first domino was small, an email from the ethics team asking him to produce documents and explain certain relationships. He shrugged it off in a text to me. "It's a misunderstanding," he wrote. He was wrong. Misunderstandings do not come with requests for documentation. Isabel's feed became choppy, less polished, more defensive. She started posting cryptic, careful statements about values and loyalty and self-accountability. Her fiancé's comments went from casual to clipped and then to radio silence. Friends took sides in tiny public commiserations that read like Tea Party politics. People are loud when they are comfortable hiding. Neighbors began to whisper too. Lydia from across the street sent a message that was both solicitous and shark-tooth curious. "Everything okay?" she wrote, but her posture at our front gate last week told a different story. People in Maplewood Heights like secrets as long as they were other people's. When the secret looked like it might be messy, they sharpened their knives. Gossip is a sport here. Men with firm names and women with polished shoes played different positions. Adam tried to blame it on a clerical error and on the jeweler who mixed up orders. His exasperation sounded practiced, like a speech he'd rehearse in the mirror after a glass of scotch. He put his phone down when he saw the text from me about the inquiries. "I'll handle it," he said, voice tight. Handle. The word smelled like confident hands on a wheel. It concealed the fact that a wheel, once jammed, can stop a car in its tracks. I pretended to believe him because pretending made him comfortable, and comfort was a soft place for me to gather information. I came home one night with a bag full of groceries and a practiced smile. He greeted me like it was normal for me to reappear after an unexplained absence. He hugged me tight, and I let him without letting him believe anything was resolved. The embrace allowed me to see his shoulder, an expensive nanofiber jacket, the slight indentation where he kept his phone on vibrate. I memorized the tilt of his head, as if it were a recipe I would later reproduce. That evening, he left his laptop open on the coffee table, documents visible, emails half-written. It was a small, careless mercy. I pretended to tidy, making tea and moving things around, my palms dusted with flour from a day of baking. His calendar showed an internal audit meeting at 10 and a client dinner at 8. The dinner was with Meridian Works, the company Isabel had mentioned in passing during our coffee. Coincidence, perhaps. Or a map. I saved a screenshot of the calendar and quietly transferred a few files to a portable drive I'd planted earlier under the sink, an old place where we kept extra bags. It felt petty and brave, like hiding extra pastries in the bakery for customers who might never come back. I did not steal anything illegal. I took nothing that would look like sabotage. I took evidence of proximity, of repeated scheduling, of discretionary time that should have been professional but read casual. It would be enough when presented with the right touch. We moved through our days like actors in a tired play. He asked about my supposed trip, and I told him a white lie about a food styling contract, and he nodded because he wanted to believe his wife was small and domestic and reachable. He liked the idea that I was unthreatening. He liked small things because small things were easy to manage. At 2 a.m, on the day I decided to push further, I burnt a tray of croissants. The smell of singed butter woke me up with a start. I laughed, a short, incredulous laugh that scared me more than the smoke alarm. The croissants were salvageable, half still golden, but the top layer had crisped in a way that made me think of fragile things scorched by amateur flames. I scrubbed the tray until my hands ached. Then I layered new dough and began again. Baking is forgiving in that way. Mistakes can be re-rolled, layers can be rebuilt. When dawn came, my phone buzzed with a notification. Isabel had posted a photo late in the evening, her smile bright in an up-close portrait, the necklace catching light above a black dress. The pendant was identical, the engraving faint but there. I stared until my eyes blurred. The image made me laugh out loud, an ugly, sharp sound, and the smoke alarm in the apartment remained mercifully silent. I thought of the croissants, imperfect but edible, and felt a satisfaction that was more composed than I would have admitted in public. The next phase required patience and timing. Send the documents to the right inboxes. Make sure Tom sees his fiancé's private messages. Let the firm's HR processes do their quiet, relentless work. Plants thrive under neglect, and so do reputations, until someone waters them with facts. Every evening, I returned to the small kitchen table with a page of notes and a cup of coffee, cooling at the edge of the mug. I wrote down times, places, and the names of people who blurred into the picture: clients, paralegals, receptionists who might remember an elevator encounter. Sometimes I added recipes in the margins, a cinnamon formula, or a note about how to keep a meringue from weeping. The juxtaposition kept me sane. It felt right that revenge should be as meticulous as a laminated dough. If you know how to fold butter into flour, you know how to fold a plan into truth. People assume cruelty is loud. It is not. It is domestic. It tastes like vanilla and sits on the counter while you kettle water for tea. It is the quiet placing of a tray at a table, watching people take one bite and not knowing why the flavor seems wrong. It is doing the small things that remove the sheen from someone's polished facade. On the last night I planned to stay in the apartment before stepping back into our house, I wrote an entry in my grandmother's recipe book as if it were a policy document. In the margins I wrote, patience, precision, presence. The words steadied me. They sounded like instructions for baking and for something larger. I knew this was only the beginning. The emails would be noticed. People would react. A firm might very politely ask a partner to take time away while they review professional conduct. An engagement might wobble under questions better left unasked. And when they moved to explain themselves, I would be a quiet voice in an inbox and a few well-timed truths in places where reputation could not be lightly dismissed. As I closed the book, I imagined the morning at our house, the kitchen empty, the necklace still gleaming on its small velvet cushion. I imagined Adam waking up and finding the absence of dinner, of careful table settings, and perhaps feeling its weight for a second. Not the right kind of weight, heavier, unmistakable, like what you feel when someone names you and you can no longer pretend the name belongs to something else. I fell asleep with flour under my nails and a plan warming in my head. The city outside the bookstore slept around me, unaware. Inside, the radiator sighed and the pages of old books rustled. I was a woman who had lost a comfortable facade and decided, calmly and with good ingredients, to get it back on her own terms. When morning came, I packed a small box of samples for Isabel's pop-up and slid a fresh batch of cinnamon rolls into a tote. I left a note for the landlord about the rent and a vague promise to return. I had a meeting with myself at noon. Push the right buttons, pull the right threads, and watch what unraveled. The bakery lights in my head had already started to glow. I smelled butter and possibilities. The apartment above the bookstore had started to feel like a command center. The radiator's constant sputter was now background music to my quiet surveillance, and the cracked wallpaper, lined with books stacked in towers, became the walls of a small, calculated war room. I spent the mornings baking for myself, the afternoons watching, and the evenings planning. Baking had taught me discipline and patience, but now those same principles applied to tracking Isabel and Adam. two people whose carelessness with truth made them predictable. I logged into her social media first thing each morning. She posted early, carefully, often with a smile that hinted at charm rather than honesty. I'd memorized her schedule, the patterns of her captions, the timing of when she was likely to share selfies from the office or snapshots from a weekend brunch. Every tag, every image of her hand on a coffee cup told me a story. I studied angles and reflections, noting things she probably didn't even realize, like a blurred shadow that always appeared when Adam was near. I created an innocuous spreadsheet on my laptop, a mixture of baking notes and research details. Columns listed dates, locations, observed coincidences, and times. At the end of each day, I reviewed everything: timestamps, overlapping routines, and the subtle signs of Adam's intrusions into her life. He thought he was careful, keeping meetings business only, but his messages betrayed him. Casual comments that suggested intimacy, small flirtations hidden behind professional phrasing. I saved them, organized them, and smiled because the law firm he worshipped and the social fabric he relied on were both about to be reminded of the consequences of negligence. I had an anonymous email drafted to Bradley Mason & Co.'s Ethics Committee, professional and clean. The screenshots were precise, each one showing interactions, timestamps, and subtle evidence that Adam's relationship with the client's director extended beyond professional bounds. I avoided exaggeration. Exaggeration is sloppy. Facts, presented clearly, have more teeth than hyperbole. The email was ready, drafted in such a way that any reasonable professional would have to at least question the boundaries he'd crossed. Meanwhile, I deepened my presence in Isabel's life through Bell Cooks. Our messaging was casual: tips, compliments, small talk about pastries and Instagram. Her personality shone through, and her confidence grew as I encouraged it. The more comfortable she felt, the more she revealed. Within a week, I had a clear map of her routine: gym visits, favorite cafes, work meetings, even the typical timing of her client retreats, the very ones where Adam's presence could no longer be dismissed as professional necessity. One afternoon, while pretending to scroll through her feed for inspiration, I noticed a new post. It was a group photo from a tech conference in Boston. Isabel's arm was draped around a man I recognized immediately: Adam. The caption read, "Great weekend with the team, learning so much about branding and strategy." I zoomed in on Adam's wristwatch, same watch he always wore, the same cufflinks he used to leave on the counter at home. There was no mistaking it. I didn't react. I sipped my coffee, made mental notes, and logged the image. Timing, location, and proximity, all verified. Isabel didn't know she was being watched, and Adam thought no one would notice. I could feel the puzzle pieces falling into place, each one sliding into its slot neatly, predictably. That night I drafted the email. My fingers hovered over the keys longer than usual, the rhythm of my typing steady. I included screenshots from social media, snippets of messages, calendar overlaps, and the photograph from the conference. Each piece was factual, devoid of judgment, carefully selected to provoke the correct response without introducing speculation. I attached it all and hit send. By morning, I received a confirmation. The Ethics Committee had opened a case file. I didn't need to celebrate. The process was slow, deliberate, and every minute it unfolded, Adam's life moved closer to predictable disruption. I watched him through his social media updates, noting his posts, sudden absences from LinkedIn, and interactions that shifted in tone. The first domino was tipped. Meanwhile, I sent a screenshot to Tom, Isabel's fiancé, without commentary. The message arrived at his professional account, innocuous on the surface, but devastating in content. I monitored until he read it. The pause, the hesitation in his reply, and the eventual silence told me everything I needed to know. People who rely on continuity are brittle when confronted with evidence. They adjust, stumble, or retreat entirely. I spent the next few days baking again, letting the dough occupy my hands while my mind orchestrated the next steps. I made almond croissants, sticky buns, and flaky turnovers. Each pastry became a meditation in patience and precision. Actions measured and deliberate, both in flour and in life, created the structure I needed. My hands were busy, my mind sharper than ever. One afternoon, I went to the cafe where I knew Isabel often met clients. I didn't approach her, didn't interact. I sat at a corner table, latte in hand, observing. She arrived precisely at the time I predicted. Her coat immaculate, hair perfectly styled. She was engaged in conversation with a colleague, but her phone lit up multiple times. She glanced at it with a practiced smile, then returned to her drink. Every glance was a data point, every movement recorded. I walked out afterward, leaving a small note tucked between the sugar packets on her table. It simply read, "Mistakes are clearer than they seem." She wouldn't notice it immediately, but I knew the message would reach her subconscious. Small manipulations have larger effects than overt confrontation. Back at the apartment, I reviewed my notes. Adam had meetings at Meridian Works 3 times in the past month, always overlapping with her appearances at conferences, events, and dinners. Patterns were emerging, and my understanding of timing, exposure, and opportunity became more precise. I began mapping not just actions, but consequences. The next day, I prepared another set of pastries and made them intentionally imperfect, slightly overbaked edges, uneven icing. I photographed them and sent the images to Isabel under the guise of a social media post. The caption read, "Testing new recipes today, learning from the little mistakes." The message was subtle, a reminder that perfection is fragile and that oversight can reveal cracks. Throughout this process, I maintained a facade with Adam. He called, texted, left voicemails, but I responded minimally. I acted uncertain, distracted by my supposed projects and errands. He interpreted it as passive worry, not investigation. People who are guilty see patterns where there are none. People who are meticulous see truths that cannot be ignored. By the end of the week, my carefully cultivated network of observations had produced enough material to create pressure on both fronts. The firm would need to act. Tom would confront Isabel, and I would remain behind the curtain, anonymous, untouchable. Each move was measured, precise, and deliberate. I spent one evening kneading dough for the next day's almond croissants while reviewing my calendar. I scheduled times for additional surveillance, messages, and social media checks. Everything aligned with realistic routines. There were no coincidences, only opportunities that I had learned to anticipate. As night fell, I lit a single candle in the kitchen, letting its light dance over the countertop. The apartment smelled of vanilla, butter, and faint flour. I reflected on how ordinary the surroundings appeared compared to the quiet orchestration that had begun. Ordinary lives, carefully curated facades, the hum of the city outside. Everything masked the truth that some careful observation and deliberate intervention could alter the course of what people assumed was stable. I allowed myself a brief smile. Isabel would continue posting, Adam would continue lying, and yet each action would play into the structure I had built, subtle, clean, and measured. The world was predictable when you watched it closely enough. The next morning, I began compiling a folder of evidence. I created PDFs with screenshots, calendar entries, photographs, and social media interactions. Each file was labeled with dates and times, ready to send, ready to be read. I did not rush. Precision was key. Evidence, once organized and presented, would speak more loudly than confrontation ever could. I checked the city streets from my window. People walked their dogs, went to work, smiled at neighbors. None of them knew the quiet processes that were unfolding above a dusty old bookstore. I felt a surge of quiet satisfaction. This was control, real control, the kind that cannot be feigned with perfume, dinners, or empty apologies. Late that afternoon, I brewed a strong tea and sat at the balcony, overlooking the street. I imagined the week ahead, the firm reviewing its documents, Tom confronting his fiancée, and the small, meticulous collapse of appearances. Actions set in motion rarely stop of their own accord. Once you arrange the pieces and wait, the structures built on lies begin to shift. I looked at the necklace in the box on my desk, the small golden pendant engraved with her name. It glimmered faintly in the light. It was more than a necklace now. It was evidence, a symbol, a constant reminder of the next phase. The first phase, discovery and quiet orchestration, was complete. The second phase, confrontation and exposure, would soon begin. I sipped the tea slowly, savoring its warmth. Patience, timing, and precision were my allies. I had learned their weaknesses, recorded their routines, and built the framework for their unraveling. The city hummed quietly below. Maplewood Heights went about its suburban business, oblivious to the carefully measured orchestration above. By the time night settled, I had mapped out the steps for the following days. More observation, more evidence, and subtle manipulations that would drive Isabel's confidence into missteps and Adam's overconfidence into exposure. The chessboard was set, the pieces in motion, and I was no longer the observer, but the architect. The radiator clanked as I closed the laptop. Flour dusted my hands from the morning's baking. I took the necklace in my palm and let it rest there, imagining the precise moments when it would appear in the right place at the right time. Control felt tangible in my fingers, solid and calculated. Tomorrow, I would watch, wait, and continue feeding the chain of cause and effect. Tomorrow, I would prepare for the inevitable ripple that comes when the first domino falls. And when it did, there would be no mistakes. The measures were exact, the timing deliberate, and the outcomes carefully constructed. The quiet orchestration of betrayal and retribution would unfold like a perfect pastry, layers folding into one another, fragile yet resilient. I placed the necklace back in its box, closed the lid, and sat in the dim glow of the apartment. Outside, the city was ordinary, unsuspecting. Above, in my kitchen command center, the next moves were already forming. The past had been documented, the present was under surveillance, the future would be directed. And in that calm, meticulous moment, I realized that the true advantage of knowledge was anticipation. Everything else, actions, reactions, consequences, would follow. By the time the week ended, the first tremors of change had begun to ripple through the quiet streets of Maplewood Heights. The sun had risen and fallen in its usual predictable way, yet inside the neat houses and manicured lawns, something was shifting. People were whispering, noting small absences, piecing together fragments of behavior that had once seemed innocuous. Adam walked among them, confident as always, unaware that the carefully constructed facade of his life had begun to erode in ways he would notice only when it was too late. I stayed in my apartment, monitoring his social media updates and occasional hurried messages, noting each small slip. One of the first indicators of his unraveling came through his LinkedIn feed. Normally polished, full of corporate achievements and status updates, it now carried a faint undercurrent of nervousness. He posted a congratulatory comment for a colleague, but left a typo in the company name. A small thing, perhaps, but noticeable to those who paid attention. I logged it. Consistency is everything in a life built on appearances. The ethics committee had begun its inquiry quietly but firmly. I saw it through a combination of open access and indirect observation. They requested documents, communications, and explanations for Adam's interactions with Isabel and her company. He responded with the kind of rehearsed calm that only someone used to courtrooms could muster. In his messages to me, He downplayed the situation, calling it a misunderstanding and asserting that it would all be cleared up soon. He didn't realize that the patterns of his routine, the documented interactions, and the evidence already submitted created a web that would catch even the most careful lies. Meanwhile, Isabel's world was shifting beneath her feet. Tom, her fiancé, had confronted her with the screenshots I had sent. The conversation had been terse, laden with awkward pauses and thinly veiled accusations. He didn't shout, he didn't need to. The quiet precision of the truth was enough to disrupt her confidence. I watched her posts change over the course of days, from confident, glossy smiles to captions that hinted at stress and reflection. She began editing her pictures more cautiously, leaving fewer locations tagged, smiling less often. The subtle fear of exposure had crept in, replacing her usual self-assured glow. I maintained the facade of distance from Adam. I returned to our house occasionally, pretending to reconcile, to calm his anxiety, while all the while continuing my observations and planning. He believed he was repairing things, that I was susceptible to reassurance. Each smile I offered him was carefully measured, each gesture of domestic normalcy a mask for the quiet manipulation I had set in motion. He did not see that every meeting, every message, and every careless comment had already been noted and organized into a timeline of exposure. The neighborhood was alive with gossip. Lydia Crane, ever watchful, had begun dropping hints in conversations that carried double meanings. "You heard about the Whitmans," she would say, tilting her head as if the question itself could create intrigue. People would lean in, curious, as Lydia painted carefully chosen details with the brushstrokes of propriety. Rumors spread quickly, fueled by suspicion and small observations. Adam leaving early for client dinners, the absence of the usual 12th anniversary celebrations, the quiet tension that seemed to hang around their house. The perception of instability is as potent as instability itself. I spent one evening preparing a new batch of pastries, kneading dough and rolling it with deliberate care. The process grounded me while I monitored social media and tracked patterns in real time. Isabel had posted a photo that afternoon from her office, the angle revealing a reflection of a man in the glass behind her desk. The reflection was subtle, but anyone who knew what to look for could recognize the contours of Adam's profile. I noted the date, time, and location. Each detail mattered. Patterns repeated, and in repetition lay evidence. Adam's behavior began to change in small, almost imperceptible ways. He started double-checking his messages before sending them, became less casual in the office, and appeared distracted in meetings. I could sense the tension even from a distance. His interactions with colleagues became clipped, defensive. He did not know why his world felt suddenly unstable, only that the ground beneath him was shifting. Each day, he moved through his routine as though balancing on the edge of a narrow beam, unaware that someone had already seen the cracks. I met Isabel again at a cafe under the guise of sharing baking tips. She did not recognize me, of course, nor did she suspect my attention was focused on cataloging every habit, every slight misstep. Our conversation was light, peppered with casual laughter and commentary about ingredients and trends in pastries. Yet beneath the surface, I was taking notes, memorizing locations she frequented, times of arrival, and the nature of her interactions with others. Small errors, such as leaving a laptop open or a document unattended, became opportunities for insight. I returned to my apartment with a tray of almond croissants and a notebook full of observations. Each page was carefully organized: time, location, social media activity, and corresponding events. I had begun mapping a schedule for both Adam and Isabel, noting overlaps, deviations, and potential exposure points. By aligning their routines, I could predict behavior with near certainty. Knowledge is power, and in this case, Anticipation would be the tool that delivered consequences. The week progressed, and subtle signs of tension became more pronounced. Isabel's posts were fewer, her captions more guarded. Tom, after confronting her, became distant. Adam, still unaware of the extent to which his professional and personal lives were under scrutiny, attempted to maintain normalcy. I observed from a distance, noting the weakening of facades and the emergence of small cracks in confidence. I spent nights at my laptop, drafting and refining messages, each document sent to the ethics committee, each screenshot provided to Tom, and each observation recorded in my spreadsheet was calculated to maximize impact without exposing me. Timing was essential. Too early, and suspicion could be traced back. Too late, and the evidence could be dismissed. I balanced patience with precision, just as I balanced ingredients when baking. One evening, while preparing cinnamon rolls, I noticed a change in Adam's tone during a brief phone conversation. He attempted charm and persuasion, asking if we could meet to discuss moving forward. I smiled at his naivete, replying with measured neutrality. "I'm busy," I said, and left it at that. Each word, each pause, was deliberate, signaling stability on my part, while leaving him to interpret the silence as uncertainty. The neighborhood continued to pulse with quiet speculation. Neighbors noticed his absence from community events, his hastened exits from the tennis courts, and his distracted demeanor at social gatherings. People whispered behind hedges and over garden fences. Even the most casual observer could sense the subtle shifts in routine and demeanor, though they did not understand the orchestration behind them. I expanded my monitoring to include indirect observation, mail patterns, delivery schedules, and even the comings and goings of Isabel's car were noted. Each observation added another layer to the unfolding narrative, another piece of the puzzle that would eventually align with precision. Small details became powerful, as cumulative patterns always do when observed with care. Adam's anxiety increased in ways visible to me through social media posts and occasional public sightings. He posted carefully curated images of his office, framed to show control, yet the subtle tension in his posture betrayed unease. People began noticing discrepancies, meetings at odd hours, unexplained absences, and the quiet but noticeable change in his demeanor. The public and private spheres, usually distinct, were beginning to intersect in ways that left him vulnerable. I prepared a batch of pastries to deliver as part of my ongoing observation strategy. Each item was intentionally uneven, visually appealing yet imperfect, a subtle reflection of the fractured appearances I observed around me. The act of creating, observing, and recording became a rhythm, a dance of meticulous attention to detail. I scheduled the next phase of my plan carefully, aligning potential exposure points with known routines. The ethics committee's review would progress methodically, Tom's confrontation would unfold naturally, and Isabel's missteps would become increasingly apparent. Each element was designed to amplify the natural consequences of carelessness, transforming them into precise, observable outcomes. By midweek, Adam's attempts to regain control were evident in his communications. He sent messages to colleagues, attempting reassurance and professionalism, yet each message carried subtle overtones of panic and defensiveness. The network of observations I had cultivated made his attempts transparent, allowing me to anticipate and record every move. I baked late into the night, the kitchen illuminated by a single lamp. Dough rose under my careful hands, and each roll, each pastry, became a symbol of patience and precision. As I worked, I considered the forthcoming intersections of events, a meeting with the ethics committee, a scheduled interaction between Isabel and Tom, and Adam's increasingly desperate attempts to maintain composure. Each occurrence had been forecasted and prepared for. The following morning, I reviewed my notes. Patterns were clear, timelines aligned, and behaviors predictable. The first real cracks in Adam's carefully constructed life were visible. Isabel's confidence had faltered, Tom's distance had grown, and the neighborhood whispers were beginning to carry weight. The fabric of appearances, once seamless, was fraying at the edges. I allowed myself a brief smile as I sipped coffee. The orchestration was proceeding according to plan. Observation, precision, and timing were all functioning as intended. I had no illusions of grandeur. Every action was small, deliberate, and grounded in reality. The structures of trust and reputation, so often taken for granted, were proving to be far more fragile than those who relied on them imagined. By evening, I compiled another set of observations and scheduled the next series of interactions. Isabel would be prompted to reveal more through subtle nudges and well-timed messages. Adam would be exposed through the firm's inquiry and his own careless actions, and Tom's presence would continue to apply pressure. The unfolding events were both predictable and satisfying in their inevitability. I placed the necklace in its box, polished and ready, a silent symbol of the orchestrated changes I had set into motion. The week had been productive, schedules verified, behaviors recorded, and the subtle collapse of appearances underway. Each element of the plan was advancing without interference, and the neighborhood continued to provide its own commentary, unknowingly amplifying the impact of my careful actions. As night settled over Maplewood Heights, I stood by the window with a fresh tray of pastries. The streets below were quiet, yet I could sense the tension growing in the lives I observed. Adam's control was slipping, Isabel's confidence waning, and the subtle social currents of the neighborhood were beginning to align in my favor. In the dim light of my kitchen, with flour on my hands and a notebook full of meticulous observations, I realized that patience had been the key. Action set into motion would now follow a rhythm established long ago, and the consequences, precise and unavoidable, were poised to unfold. I closed the notebook and sat at the table sipping tea. Outside, the world continued, unaware that beneath the calm suburban surface, lives were shifting in ways deliberate and irreversible. The cracks in the mirror of appearances were widening, and the reflection no longer held the illusion of stability. Tomorrow, the orchestration would continue, each move calculated, each outcome anticipated. The quiet observance, the careful documentation, and the methodical execution had reached a point where the unfolding events were no longer contingent, they were inevitable. And in that quiet control, I found satisfaction. The first real signs of change were visible. The facade of perfection in Maplewood Heights was beginning to falter, and I was ready to guide its collapse with precision, patience, and an unerring sense of timing. The storm started quietly, a low rumble over the streets, leaves shivering in place. I parked a few blocks from Isabel's house, tires crunching over gravel, and stepped out, careful not to be noticed. The sky was dark, the street lamps casting halos, the wind tugging at my coat. Preparation had taken weeks, but execution required confidence and timing. Her house was a 2-story colonial, immaculate lawn, the kind of place everyone admires from a magazine. From the street, I watched her move inside, carrying papers, talking on the phone. She laughed sharply, tossing her hair, unaware she was being observed. I approached the driveway, crouched near the edge. Using a small tool, I loosened the cap on the car's windshield washer reservoir. It wouldn't ruin the vehicle, only create annoyance. Small, deliberate inconvenience has impact. I moved to the back of the house, circling to identify areas of exposure. A porch light revealed flower pots and a vegetable patch. A dusting of flour on the steps and plants would create unease without damage, subtle disruption. I left the flower trail leading to the patio door and stepped back. From across the street, I watched as Isabel emerged, umbrella in hand, noticing the streaked windshield and flower trail. Confusion and irritation crossed her face. Small gestures, minor disruptions, subtle observation. This was control without confrontation. I followed her to a cafe the next day under the guise of coincidence. She didn't notice me. Her routine, meticulous and predictable, confirmed my observations. Small deviations from her usual route became valuable data. Back at my apartment, I prepared pastries intentionally imperfect, photographing them and sending them to her under my alias. The caption read, "Testing new designs, small imperfections make all the difference." A subtle message, harmless on the surface, yet psychologically impactful. Adam's professional life began to show strain. He arrived late, left early, and missed routine meetings. The ethics inquiry was underway, and each adjustment he made played into the orchestration I had designed. That evening, I returned to Isabel's house, carrying a tray of baked goods with a note. Mistakes are learning opportunities. Subtle, precise, deliberate. From a distance, I observed her reaction. Confusion, suspicion, slight unease. Timing, anticipation, precision, my tools. I reviewed observations, photographs, and social media posts. Isabel's confidence waned, Adam's composure faltered, and the neighborhood whispers grew sharper. The first cracks had appeared. I spent the next day continuing minor disruptions, leaving notes, pastries, and reminders. Observation, preparation, and patience had begun to work their magic. Each response confirmed the patterns I had anticipated. By night, I mapped the next steps, continue monitoring routines, introduce subtle disruptions, and maintain distance while preparing for the final sequences of engagement. The orchestration was near completion. Flour dusted my hands, the golden necklace nearby. Patterns were observed, behaviors anticipated, and consequences had begun to unfold. The storm had passed outside, but the quiet, deliberate turbulence I orchestrated was only gaining strength. The first cracks were visible. The next moves would not be subtle. They would be decisive, deliberate, and perfectly timed. Morning light sliced through the blinds, highlighting the bakery floor. Second chances had only been open 2 weeks, yet the air already carried the warmth of cinnamon, vanilla, and quiet satisfaction. The ovens hummed, the mixers whirred, and everything smelled of precision, control regained, and subtle triumph. Adam had called early, leaving multiple messages alternating between pleading and tentative explanations. I ignored them. This wasn't about negotiation or reconciliation. Months of observation and calculated action had led to this moment. He had underestimated me, and now his assumptions would meet the results of their own construction. The day moved forward normally. Customers came and went, drawn by aroma and reputation. I moved among them with efficiency, smiles precise, words measured. Outside, life appeared ordinary, unaware of the careful orchestration behind the scenes. By midday, I saw him outside, pacing. He approached hesitantly, tie slightly askew, hands uneasy. He rang the doorbell twice and waited. I didn't answer immediately. Observation was my advantage. Patience amplified its effect. Finally, he entered through the side door I had unlocked weeks ago. The bakery smelled of sugar, almonds, and fresh bread. I was at the counter, arranging pastries, turning to face him with a calm, measured smile. "Hi," he said. "We need to talk." "Take a seat," I said, gesturing to the chair. Calm, measured, controlled. He adjusted his cufflinks, voice tight. I want to explain. The necklace, the messages, I never meant—" "You never meant what?" I interrupted. "To assume patience meant compliance? To treat everything as yours?" He paused. Months of subtle exposure and calculated consequence had left him no room. "I made mistakes," he said. "I want to make it right." "Making it right would require understanding what it's like to have control stripped from you," I said. "You've seen a taste of that already." He noticed small details, flower trails, notes tucked under trays, the deliberate arrangement of ingredients. Every detail communicated control and attention. "You've ruined everything," he said quietly, confirming the precision of my actions. "I've restored balance," I said. "You assumed I wouldn't notice. You assumed patience meant passivity. It didn't. It meant preparation." He leaned forward, voice urgent. "Please, just listen. We can fix this. Start over." I laughed softly. "Start over? Consequences can't be reset. Actions have patterns. Patterns have outcomes. You watched yours unravel without seeing the cause. Now you face the result." He sank back, searching for opportunity. There was none. Every move, every assumption, every casual act had been accounted for. His professional standing and personal life had been subtly disrupted. I placed a tray of pastries in front of him. "Notice the details," I said. "The imperfections are deliberate. Life mirrors the care or carelessness you show." Adam swallowed. No, I interrupted. "There's nothing left to argue. The patterns are visible, evidence clear, outcome set. You cannot charm your way through this." He leaned forward again. "I didn't think it would go this far." "I hope you didn't think at all," I said. "Observation, patience, preparation, these aren't accidental. You assumed I would bend or forgive. You were wrong." The necklace gleamed on the counter. "This isn't just jewelry," I said. "It's evidence, a record, a reminder that what you leave unguarded is always noticed." He reached instinctively, but I held the box. "No, you cannot erase what has been documented. Every attempt to manipulate, every casual comment, recorded, anticipated, arranged." His face shifted from disbelief to resignation. The confidence that had allowed him to navigate boardrooms, dinners, and neighborhood appearances was stripped away by observation. He sat silently, realizing the weight of months of preparation. I moved beside him. "This is the culmination." No one intervened. "Consequences unfolded because your behavior created them. You underestimated observation, and it has been the instrument of your undoing." He looked for weakness. There was none. Every gesture, every word, every sequence had been executed deliberately. Months of planning had led here. "I see now," he said quietly. "I underestimated you. I underestimated everything." "Recognition is important, not for you, but for clarity," I said. "Actions have outcomes. Patterns have consequences. You assumed I was passive, and you were wrong." He exhaled sharply, tension giving way to comprehension. The world he thought he controlled had shifted. Appearances fractured. Structures he relied upon were altered, subtly but irrevocably. I walked the bakery floor, adjusting trays, moving ingredients. Each gesture mirrored the same precision guiding my previous actions. Control had been maintained not through confrontation, but through preparation and observation. Returning to the counter, I placed my hands lightly on the edge. Observe. Consequences arrive quietly, deliberately, without spectacle. Actions, patterns, and timing deliver clarity in ways arrogance never anticipates. Adam looked around, seeing the layers of planning and attention. Observation, patience, and precision had achieved what confrontation could not. Outside, life continued obliviously. Inside, consequences had been delivered, patterns observed, outcomes complete. "Everything you assumed about patience was wrong," I said. "Every casual act, every unguarded moment, it's been noted, and the results are here." He nodded, silent, absorbing the finality. No negotiation, no reclamation, no new beginnings. I returned to my pastries, the scent of almonds and cinnamon thick in the air, allowing myself quiet satisfaction. Observation, preparation, and timing had delivered their natural conclusion. Adam's world had shifted irreversibly. The necklace rested nearby, a constant reminder of careful orchestration. Outside, Maplewood Heights remained unaware. I stepped back, flower on my hands, eyes on the street. The sequence was complete. Consequences arrived. Patterns observed, documented, executed with meticulous care. Control was absolute. Everything was as it was meant to be.